I guess roughly we want to talk about, the general application process, all the little things that are involved in that, and from your portfolio to getting your letters of recommendation, to your transcripts, all these kind of things. So we're just going to kind of go at it, and then if we need to be redirected back to a certain way, you guys should just take us there, okay? So I guess the general thing is to figure out why you're applying, for graduate school to begin with,
Should we introduce
Oh, yes. Sorry, I jumped.
Before we go
jumped
right
the gun.
into it.
I jumped the gun. I'm Aaron Giesel. I'm a MFA student here, and I'm going into my third year.
Renee Chartier, my first year. And I'm Chelsea Mosher, and this is my first year. Sorry.
And we're all grad students.
Oh, yeah. That would be helpful. No?
Yeah. So basically, I think the first question you should ask yourself is why an MFA? And then once you figure that out, I think you should really kind of go back into your work and figure out what you have, and what you're working with. Because a lot of, I think the biggest thing is to kind of, the body of work that you're leaving your BFA with might not be what you necessarily want to use to apply to a program. It might be, but you might need to kind of work out some things. So really think about those issues first. I think also that, getting, your MFA, I think has a lot of, everybody has different opinions or views on what that really means. And I think you should really be, right now with the economy being so bad, it's probably a good place to be, to get into. But you're also going to be taking a lot of debt. And so that's another thing to consider, and maybe it's a good thing, but it might be better to take a little more time before you get into it, and really develop some stuff before you apply. So once you figure that out, I think, and you still want to apply, then it's then you're getting into the process. You guys want to jump in with anything?
Are any of you guys going through this process right now, looking at schools?
I'm applying this coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, January.
Yeah. So now is the time. That's good to figure out the timeline. I definitely made some mistakes and missed some schools when I decided to apply. We were kind of going over some of the little things that get missed along the way, like collecting transcripts from other schools you might have attended, things you wouldn't think of, like that you went to a community college for one semester and you forgot all about that. You'll still need to collect all of that documentation that sort of just rounds out your existence or whatever. And something like not having something like that can totally throw your application out, even though you've spent 2 months writing this amazing epic essay and putting your portfolio together. Not having this one piece of documentation can throw the whole thing off.
Yeah, I think cohesion is really, really important when you're going through this process. You're presenting yourself to a board of people who don't know you. You're just images and on a page, and I think the most important thing is present yourself as professional artists working, not as, I'm just coming out of my BFA and I want to keep going to school. Have a cohesive body of work that you've spent time on that has a point of view. Have all of your letters be cohesive. Everything that you do, you want it to be just the best presentation you can possibly have.
Yeah, and with that said, the main thing here is giving yourself enough time. A lot of time, because you're not going to be able to pull this together in a week.
So things
will go wrong.
You're going to have
a ton of stuff will go wrong.
Tons of stuff are going to go wrong.
Tons.
And you're going to be stressed out because, you haven't got that letter of recommendation from that one professor that said he's going to give it to you and you need to get it, and, and then you end up having to drive to their house in the middle of the night to, these kind of weird things that do happen. So I think really you need to think about the whole thing, a lot of these deadlines are usually in January or the end of December. Some of these programs have school deadlines where you got to get your application in first to the school and then to the program itself. So you got to think about those things. which I think is some, like UCLA is kind of like that. I think you got to get an application into their school, and then
It's early too.
It's early. It's like December.
15th.
Some of them are
Yeah.
early
So
December.
first thing you should do,
Check all deadlines.
all the
for
deadlines,
all
and then go
programs.
back from there.
Read everything. Read their
Right.
instructions. That's really important. Everybody
Print
has.
everything out. Like, don't just look at it on a monitor. Like, it really is
Yeah.
helpful to have paper sometimes.
A lot of them have different, very specific instructions, and each one is different. Like, one school is going to be like label it with your last name first, and then the title of the work, and the other one's going to be title of the work and your last name. So you got to get these things very downright, because if not, I mean, that could be the flaw that they throw out your application, and they don't even look, because you didn't format everything right. So formatting is totally important,
And they want to see that you can follow direction, that you're responsible enough to be able to take these guidelines and execute them. If you can't do that, then how are you going to make it in a graduate program,
True. Yeah.
Like the application process is hard, but they're kind of preparing you for what you're going to.
What you're up against, yeah.
Well, an
If they
artist-
want to see that you're
yeah.
responsible.
Which is other people that are totally organized, so those are the people that they're going to let in,
And artists get a bad rap for being disorganized, so I think it's an opportunity to prove that you're a very thorough and can execute sort of like mindless strategy or something. And with the letters of recommendation, I think it's really important when you ask somebody for one to really make sure they can give you a good letter of recommendation, that they understand, like, I'm applying to a graduate program, and this is really an important step for me, and I want to ask you, can you write me a good letter of recommendation? Which might be a scary question to ask, but it's their responsibility to give you a truthful answer, and you might need to ask a few people.
And I would, while you're in your undergrad now, I would be building these relationships with your professors and with people around adjunct professors that can give you good letters of recommendation. And if grad school is what's on your mind, or maybe it's not, maybe you're going to take a break, but then you're going to have to come back and get those letters. So I would really kind of try to build those relationships.
So do they typically ask for a certain number of letters, or is it sort of like
Yeah.
as many as you
It's
can?
about, it's
Yeah.
usually 3.
Two-
that's
Two to three,
standard.
depend.
2 to 3,
2 to
yeah.
3, yeah.
I had one program that was 4.
Yeah.
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 So is
But
it-
don't,
okay.
I was gonna say, just, don't, I wouldn't try to go give 5 and be like, I'm so great, you
Don't
know?
do that,
Just
yes.
do exactly what they
want.
say.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what
yeah.
I was
Exactly.
thinking, but I was wondering, as far as, should they be letters from, if we came from a community college, is it okay if one of those letters came from sort of a faculty member there?
Yes.
Or-
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I think a diversity of sources is.
It doesn't have to
good.
be from your institution or where you came from, Cal State Long Beach. They can be from outside sources. Say you're friends with a curator or a gallerist or something like that. Maybe they can write you a letter, Or if you've interned for somebody or you're doing work for somebody, letters from those people are great too,
Now, how does that necessarily work? Should you sort of limit those letters to people that are maybe more in the gallery or fine art world?
They
Or-
should be engaged with an artistic practice,
Yeah.
and they should be able to comment on
On
your
you.
work ethic as an
Yeah.
artist and your practice, so that it's directly related to.
And,
And I think
and those
the-
strategies are open. I mean, it could be, maybe you're working for somebody that's somewhat commercial, but they're going to testify to your work ethic, and then you have someone else that knows your artistic side. So I mean, there's ways to kind of balance all these out, I think, with having one letter that does one thing and another letter that does something else.
That
Maybe
speaks
show you're
to
a
all
little
your
more
strengths.
well-rounded.
That could be a way to go about it.
So what about a letter from an art history professor? who would
Yeah.
like
That's
that?
great.
Yeah,
Good.
absolutely.
I think that's great, yeah.
And because they're going to be able to speak especially to your, your academic achievements, and an art historian is going to have an experience with you where you've had to respond to deadlines, and you've had to, you've had to write about art and demonstrate that you're engaged in an intellectual practice, which all MFA programs are going to have a very intellectual side to it. So I think getting an art historian is really a good part of rounding things out.
I think also it's really important, like you spoke about getting a letter from community college. Maybe you went there right out of high school and now you're here. And so I think it's really interesting to be able to have a letter that demonstrates how you've evolved from there. Like if you had a relationship with someone for 4 years and they've seen you when you first started to now, and they can kind of attest to your evolution and how much they've seen you grow. And I think that could be a really great thing.
The one thing I will say is, you want to ask these letter writers, though, if they can write a good letter of recommendation. That's really important, and that they feel comfortable doing that. Because you don't want them to kind of give you a wishy-washy letter, or maybe something that might be somewhat negative, And I mean, in my personal experience, I had a letter that was bad, and I found out later, And it kind of ruined my first attempt at grad school, which was only one institution. But I think these are things to really consider, And that person just thought he was, doing a good thing, just being, talking about my character, because he knew like rough sides of me, and he knew sides that were better than that, and so he kind of included everything. And that was kind of a flag for a place, that really liked the work but was concerned about other issues,
So how do you go about knowing if the letters are good or not? I mean, are
You
allowed
ask
to
them. You ask them. Can you write me a good letter?
And that's it. You
Can
just take
read
it on
them? I
faith.
mean,
No.
No, they don't. Some people are open like that, but most you aren't going. They're going to give you the letter sealed.
I've heard of
Yeah.
people actually
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, can you write the letter for me?" So if somebody does that, I mean, I hope that doesn't happen. Don't do that.
Oh, for
Get a
that person
saying,
and
you
using
can
their name?
You can just
Yeah.
write it and
Yeah.
then no.
No.
But I think though that one of the things that will help you have the best chance to get a great letter is to allow a lot of time, because you have to understand anybody you're asking is getting several requests. And one of the best pieces of advice that I got, that you maybe have gotten also, I'm going to apologize if I'm being repetitive, but when you ask somebody, like give them a packet of like supporting materials about yourself, like a short resume, because you have to think how many students all of your professors have, and even though you might have had a really special connection with them, just to give them a list of highlights to remind them, like, we worked on this project and this is what I did, and then I was in this group show, and in this class I did this, or your professor might not know the things that you did in some of your other classes, because they're going to use that as sort of like a source material when they're writing. It gives them something to draw from when they're writing that letter, because they're going to need to like create a story about you. So I think when you give them some autobiographical material that has all of your your highlights in school and anything that you've done outside of school will also, I think, help.
You might also want to show them the body of work that you're applying with. That's,
Yeah,
I think, helpful.
that's a great idea.
So.
Yeah, and also if you're thinking about applying, if you're not thinking about this as something to do next year, maybe if it ends up being a few years down the road, don't be afraid to contact your professors from here and ask them. Don't be afraid to ask for letters. Your professors want to see you, succeed, and they're here to do that. But do be graceful about it, and allow for that time, and make sure they know that their time is valuable.
So if deadlines are usually January or December, I would start asking them. It's maybe the beginning of summer, like July.
So, for the letters recommendation,
Yeah.
if you apply to different schools, do you have to get new letters each time?
They will have to address them
Dress that schools.
separately.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
you
Do they
can
send
give
letters
them-
themselves, or do they send you single ones and you send it in a packet?
You
It
can do either.
Either, and a lot of these programs now are setting things up where it's online.
Online,
So
like
so the
Mine is online.
yeah. So the application for the letter of recommendation will be submitted through electronically. So they'll do it online, and they'll have like a link that they go to that you send out to them,
You
or
need
get
to
sent
make
out.
it really clear
Yeah.
to the professors, like this is exactly how you submit, so that they don't have to do any extra
Right.
work, so they don't have to be annoyed with you in the middle of the night when they're trying to send this and you didn't give them all the information on how to submit the recommendation, so that it's really, you just want everything to be so easy.
All
Yeah,
these schools.
you want it to be as easy for them as possible, so that
Yeah.
nothing can go wrong.
Yeah, all these schools have. I mean, they're very clear about their each of them are very clear about their own particular procedure of how to apply. So just go to the school that you're interested in and look at what their procedures are, follow those rules, you know? And it's pretty laid out. I mean, you just have to figure out where you're going to apply. And all
Like
these
the ones
things.
that
Yeah.
are mailed in, I provided like addressed stamped envelopes to the people that were writing the recommendations. So all they had to do
With an instruction letter.
Yeah, the instruction
Yeah.
letter and like all the supporting materials. And they're going to put it on their letterhead and they're going to sign it. And they usually will sign their name across the back of the
seal, yeah.
envelope so that it can never be. I had a professor, I asked her for a recommendation, and sometimes you collect them and you'll send them all sealed and signed and with your application, so I had to go and collect all of them. And then I decided not to apply to one of these schools. So I was in a situation where I could have kept this letter and opened it and see what she wrote, but I think that's totally unethical, and I didn't. And I'm really glad that I didn't, because then, she asked for it back. Because they don't want you to, even though I believe that she wrote me a good letter and she said that she would, they still, it's kind of, they're taking extra liberties when they, maybe they will reveal one of your weaknesses that they think could be encouraged in a graduate program, right? Why would you be going to graduate school if you didn't have things you needed to work on and growth to embark on?
Yeah, I would, again, back to what I was saying earlier, I really question your motives for grad school, what that is. Really in a program, what you're doing is you're growing a body of work. You're trying to push forward what you normally do, and also you're thinking about work, So some of you might not be ready for that, or maybe you'll have to, or maybe you are, but think about those things very specifically, You're also getting into, I assume most everyone here is photo-based, right? Think about this, when you're getting into a program, you're not really getting into a photo program, you're getting into an art program. So you have to enter into a discipline that where you're considering all these things that sculptors and painters would also consider, in their disciplines. So, there's a lot of things to think about as far as an art practice, and not just a body of work of what you're really trying to get at, through what your work,
How did you guys look into schools that were probably best interest towards you guys? And then what were some things that you guys ran into, applying?
Yeah, I think first off, I wanted to, my criteria for deciding on schools was based on who I really wanted to study with. So I kind of was looking at people's work that I was really interested in, and I think that's a good basis to start from. And also maybe what that school is producing. So if there's a lot of artists that are coming out right now from wherever it is that interests you, you might want, consider who's teaching there, do some research, figure that out. Figure out where your work belongs. Maybe there's a certain group of artists that are at a certain place that are kind of making similar work, and maybe the place that you really want to go to isn't the right fit for what you're doing. That's really something I think to think about. So that was so when I was thinking about things, I was just thinking about those kind of criteria of who I really want to study with. And that was a list of I want to study with this person, this person, this person, and then they're at this school and this school, and
For me, it was more of if there was kind of this hierarchy of location was first, and also I only applied to public schools because that was important to me. I wanted to be at a state school. I felt I had California residency. I moved here from the East Coast to do that, so that was kind of important first, and then also, what was coming out of the program was really important. I wanted to feel like I could envision myself in my work in this program, and to be supported in that program also. I think a horrible thing to do would be to apply to a program and get in and then feel like you're not, what you want to say isn't supported.
Right.
And that probably wouldn't happen, but it could.
Good.
And so that was important for me, and then,
Yeah, I had similar requirements. I wanted to go to a state school also. The last thing I wanted to do is spend $40,000 a year getting an MFA. I'm not sure, there are a lot of things that can come out of this. You can work within an art institution, you can teach, it's kind of like you'll probably be an adjunct at community colleges and universities, and you'll be driving all over the place. So you kind of have to think about, you know, I'm not trying to become a millionaire. I'm not going to law school. I don't have a career that's going to allow me to pay back $900 a month when I get out. So I was looking at state schools that, you know, where you might have opportunities of teaching experience. You know, maybe like if you go to Yale, you're not going to get teaching experience.
Very
That's
true.
an important thing.
Very
The
true.
teaching
Yeah.
experience is different at every school. Make sure that if that's something you want to do and you're interested in, make sure that there is a
program
way for you to
supports it.
do that. Some schools you can't at all, like, and then other schools like San Diego State right now, their grads teach foundation courses and photo courses, you know, and there's a lot of opportunity for that. So if that's something that you're interested in, definitely make sure that there's opportunity.
Yeah, because you need to think when you get out of you know, having an MFA. I mean, I think ideally you want to be able to have like a sustainable art practice, and you know, you don't know where that's going to lead. Maybe you'll be like the hot flavor of the month, and you'll get into the Whitney Biennial, and you'll like sell tons of artwork. But that, you know, I've had a lot of friends go through those kinds of arcs, and it's, you know, art is very fickle. So you'll probably be like supplementing your art practice with teaching or like or commercial work, and all of that stuff. I mean, I think it's like, yeah, all factors in. It's like you're kind of like piecing all these different things together that like your MFA will always enhance. And I also wanted to live in Southern California, so I was looking at locations and schools, and then I wanted to go to a MFA program that had a photo focus. And increasingly, a lot of the MFA programs are becoming more interdisciplinary, and you know, so for instance, I applied to one school that's very like heavy on like interdisciplinary performance stuff. Well, I had a complete photography portfolio, so like obviously I didn't get into that school. And you won't get into every school you apply to, and that's okay. I have friends that have applied to 6 or 7 schools and only gotten into one, and they got into the school that was like their dream school, and they didn't get into their like backup school. It kind of in the end is so weird.
There's
like,
so
where
many
There's
you
no
get-
logic
where
to
you
it. There's no
go.
logic to it at all. Yeah.
There's so many factors that go into the way that students are chosen that if there's a school that you really want to go to, apply. Just apply. Don't ever get discouraged by, you know, they only let 2 people in yet. I think it's always, you know, go for it.
Because you might be that
Yeah.
those people, you know,
Yeah.
like, or one of those persons that gets in, but you never know until you do it, you know. You also might get on a wait list, you know. So that first year, that school that you really want to go to, you might get waitlisted, and you might get into other places, and you might want to think about reapplying to that place that you really want to get into that you were waitlisted on. I mean, these are things to consider, and they're. I mean, it's a reality, you know. I mean, because that can happen, you know.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering, so, you said that if you want to teach at a grad school that allows you to teach like a plus, you know, that maybe teach like a lower level class. But so if you go to a place like Yale, or for example, and chances are you're not going to be able to teach there. You know, how would that really affect your ability to get a teaching job? I mean, if you have an MFA from Yale, wouldn't that be a plus to go get a teaching job?
Yes and no.
It is,
Yeah.
but to have that experience coming out of a graduate program is really, really valuable.
I mean, what do you think is more valuable?
I think if you get into Yale, go for it, and if you can pay for it. But
Yeah.
But that's not
Bring it up.
necessarily the answer. There's a lot more answers out there other than Yale, you know, I think. And you're right. I mean, there are
Yeah.
credentials like a UCLA does look good on your resume, but that doesn't really. It comes down to your work, I think. I mean, I do see there are people that have even taught here recently that came from Yale, and Mark Weiss has been teaching around. He came from Yale. So I mean, there's people that do teach that weren't, you know, getting that kind of instruction explicitly. But I think it will help you, though, if you have experience. A lot of these programs, too, like UCLA and Yale, they're like 2-year programs. And most of the other programs that are offered out there are 3-year. And I think that's something really to think about, because I think a 3-year program is very beneficial. Your first 2 years, you're kind of figuring out things, and that last year, I think, really solidifies what you're doing, you know? So I think that's something to consider is, you know, maybe you do have a lot of work that right out of your undergrad that you're just gonna like blaze through, and that'll be your MFA, and you have everything figured out. Some people can do that, you know, but I really think graduate school is a time to kind of germinate and to kind of get within yourself and to really kind of think about issues, not just like, oh yeah, I haven't figured out this is what's going to happen. You know, I think those 3 years are really important.
I think a lot of people go into the grad school thinking they have things figured out, and then basically the formula is to basically break down everything that you know and kind of build you back up again. Do you agree with that? Kind of, a lot of people think that's the theory behind graduate school, and so I think that yeah, I think to have those 3 years to kind of explore is really important. It was important to me.
It's important, yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of what you've learned in undergraduate too is a lot of skills. You've built your base. That's what you're working on now. And graduate school is a point where that gets pushed even further. It's not just about skills anymore. It's about what you're doing with your practice, what you're really getting at with your pictures, you know, and not just that you can make a picture, because that is kind of figured out, you know. It's like what you're really kind of trying to do with your art practice at that point.
Well, you
And
can like break it
down.
down. Like if you're a classically trained musician, you're like now at the point where you can make like avant-garde like sound compositions. You can just like completely like disintegrate like everything that you've learned if you want.
I have a question. Where'd you do your undergrad?
At a state school in Portland, Oregon, Portland State University.
Where'd you go?
I went to a state school in Rhode Island.
Okay. And you went?
Art center?
Yeah.
And so I think we all have kind of diverse backgrounds, so which is interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
And I would say too about the teaching thing, maybe just think of it as like another thing that the program offers. Like, you know, you'll be considering all of those things, like who's the faculty, what are the facilities. Although I would say faculty always trumps facilities. You know,
Yes.
like I mean,
Yeah.
for instance, Cal State
I mean-
Long Beach has great faculty, like maybe not the best facilities, but it's those
Decent.
relationships.
It's
But, you
decent
know,
though.
when
It's
you're
decent
like looking,
comparatively.
it's like they're
Yeah.
luring you in with
Yeah.
the sexiness of all of their
Yeah.
like the things they have and the studios and like the
It-
printers
The
and
accessibility of the faculty also, like
Yeah.
you're gonna have maybe at Yale, maybe you have like Greg Crutzen, but is he really accessible all the time?
A lot of these people aren't going to be that accessible. I mean, you go to UCLA and like there's Baldessari, Charles Ray, all these people that are like art stars, but you're not going to really have meetings with them that often. Maybe once while you're there, maybe twice, you know. But you have to think about the reality in the everyday, you know. I think the everyday is really important of who you can interact with and how that interaction is, you know.
So how do you find out the faculty that are going to be more accessible, the ones that are not? Is it just based on their name?
I think go and speak. One of the most
Yeah.
important things you can do is to go to the school and have a tour and speak to all of the current graduates, and they will tell you, they will be so honest, they will say, what do you want to know, we'll tell you everything. So go to them with specific questions and ask them about that, and they will tell you, they'll be honest, you know. Some of them, if they're jaded, then they'll spell, you know.
Yeah, spell it out for you.
Like
And that's the thing too, is I would encourage every one of you to go and take a visit to the school that you're interested in, or schools, and maybe even if they're on the East Coast, I would really go, because the reality of going there and seeing and
Yeah.
talking and letting them know who you are, you know, and they might not look at your portfolio, but they'll know your name and they'll know what's going on and they'll know your interest in school, and I think that's really important.
that shows you're kind of like you're eager, you really want to be there to take that and to get to know them, and also, you know, come to them with questions, come to them with things you want to know.
You can actually ask them like, what do you want to see in my portfolio that I submit? That I've been told by several professors at other institutions besides Cal State that they actually they remember those conversations with the students that like seek them out and kind of have like a preliminary like portfolio discussion. Like it's okay to even though it seems like it wouldn't be or intimidating or something, just to kind of talk to them about your work in advance, like before you put it together. Because once you put that together, you can use kind of the same materials for all of these applications, your images that you put together and your essay that you write about, why you're...
Statement of purpose,
Your
yeah.
statement of purpose about getting an MFA.
Some of the programs have more like mystery, and there's like this lack of transparency, and I think that kind of builds up their reputation also.
Right.
So I think getting underneath that by talking to people as much as you can, I think will to kind of demystify that.
Yeah.
I think it's important.
Yeah.
Really get to know what you're going to be in for, and not just the school that's on your, resume. You're just not filling up your CV here. You're like really going to spend years of your life working there. So.
I think another thing too to consider is not just grad school is also a time that gives you the space that you can create work, and it's not really necessarily about the school. It's really about you and what you're trying to do. So I think that is a secondary consideration. I mean, is the school sometimes everyone gets kind of caught up in that, the reputation, this and that. It's really, any graduate program I think is good because it gives you that space to make, and it really comes down to you and your work. I mean, ultimately, you can come from a lesser school and still have a career. It's really just about your work.
And the type of school you go to is going to possibly allow you to spend more time making. I'm here and it's affordable for me. I don't have to work full time and to be able to support myself and go to school. I can take the time to work.
Take out private loans.
Exactly.
Things like that.
So do what's really going to work for you. If it's going to be too much money, don't do it. It's not worth
It's not
to
worth
have
it,
loans.
yeah.
Because
It's
you
really
actually
not worth
can't
it.
borrow all of the money you need
Mm-mm.
to go to a school that costs $30,000 a year. As a graduate student, you can borrow $10,000 a semester. $10,000 a semester, that's it. And government, doesn't matter what school you go to, it doesn't matter if the school costs $50,000 a year, all you can borrow is $10,000 a
subsidized
semester.
loans.
Yeah, the subsidized loans. So then you get into this issue where you will be borrowing private money that you cannot, with Obama's new 10% of your income repayment plans, that money you won't be able to get any sort of like government forgiveness. So that is something to think about as well, just so you don't, because you don't want to get out of graduate school and have to throw away all the opportunities you've built for yourself because you need to get a job at a bank now or something to pay back your loans. Because it's kind of like a long-term investment. Hopefully you can just transition from what you're doing in graduate school without a lot of
Right.
difficulty into what you're doing after graduate school, but it'll be one sort of pond that you're in or something. But it can be a real game changer if you come out with $100,000 in private loans. And some of those schools might be easier to get into if they're having financial difficulty, because let's face it, every college is business, and depending on how much money the board of trustees needs to raise that year, they might accept more people than they normally would. That means they're going to be getting a few extra $1 million that year.
Right.
I'm kind of have extreme opinions about that stuff, so take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, but it is worth, thinking about.
So are there any other questions?
Yeah, you guys talked about visiting campuses and trying to get maybe a preliminary interview with maybe a professor or something. So did you guys, first, did each of you do that? And second would be, my experience even looking for places to go to undergrad. I'm transferring from a community college. I called some places and tried to make maybe an appointment or something. And administrators seem to be very much their job was to sort of get in the way of allowing you that access.
I experienced the same thing, and I think...
But then the professors
yeah.
were very much eager to
Right.
talk to the people, at least without my experience.
Right. I think you're going to have better luck, though, as a graduate student approaching a program than an undergrad. Actually, as for my undergrad, I thought about coming here, and it was considered, and I remember calling and trying to make appointments, and it was hard to even get access to anybody, And I'm sure that professors here or anywhere else wouldn't have any trouble talking to you. Yeah, they probably would welcome that because they want people in their program. But it is tougher to communicate. Whereas I think at a grad level, they're more open to talk because they're maybe they're more invested in that level, of education at that point.
I went to maybe about 4 out of the 6 schools that I applied to, and it was pretty easy. I mean, you do have to be a little like headstrong sometimes, trying to get appointments, and but ultimately, I think they want to sell to you. You know, you're it's
Prospective buyer, right?
You are. You're someone that's coming in and say, hey, I want to drop down this many thousands of dollars, and they want to like show you what they have. So I think it's definitely, I mean, but it's another thing of time. Make sure that you give yourself enough time to go.
I would start doing a lot of this stuff in the summertime if you're thinking about applying in the fall or
I think it's also good
January,
though
yeah.
to go when the programs are in.
Well, that's
because
yeah,
I
yeah,
went to
yeah.
some-
I would, yeah.
I
yeah.
went, and I think
Yeah.
your perspective will change after you go to a program. You might have a perspective, like you read about the program and you think you know what it's about, and faculty, once you go there, you might have a different kind of vibe. You might not like it. You might, like, after you talk to the current students, you might be turned off a little bit. That was kind of my experience in a couple places. But I think it would be interesting to go when they're working and to see the students in their studios, to see what's kind of going on.
Yeah, I would agree. Not necessarily
attention
summer, but I would
or-
start setting things up
Yeah.
in the summer so when fall hits that you're right there. And a lot of them have meetings at they'll say they'll do tours at certain points during the term. So you might not even be able to get a tour of the program until say like October or November, depending on the program.
And ask to sit in on a crit if possible.
Yep.
Some offer them. Some will say, let us know if you want to. Other ones, you'll have to be more specific and ask. But definitely try to do that. So you'll see kind of
How it functions,
Where-
what the conversation
dynamic.
is. Yeah.
The dialogue is really,
the
you'll
dialogue
get
in
so
all
much
the different schools are so
information.
different.
Yeah, is it more like a theory dialogue? Is it more like a formal, like aesthetic dialogue? I mean, you'll hear how people you would be going to school with are talking about work and thinking about work. And I mean, that's interesting because you're potentially going to be sitting in on that conversation with them. So if it's a conversation that's completely disinterests you or turns you off, maybe it's not the right place. Although could be very difficult to tell from visiting one crit as well. I mean, our crits are so different from group to group. It's kind of amazing and kind of awesome. That's kind of one of the really cool things about grad school is just a lot of angles.
Yeah,
at all
lots of
times.
dialogue. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think an interesting thing that you brought up is to hear how your peers speak, because the programs are so geared toward, you are interacting with your peers, and I think that's really interesting to be able to see potentially, if you do sit on a credit, potentially some people that you will be in your program if you get in. I think that's important.
Yep.
If you want to be part of that or not.
And then I think in a lot of ways, those relationships that you develop when you're in graduate school with your peers, that's kind of like your network that you move out into the world with. I notice it here all the time with like Asha and Vishal, people that went to UCLA together. They're always talking about their colleagues from grad school. They're all still very much moving through the world. At least I get the impression that they're moving through the world together because they had this experience where, as Renee was saying, they kind of all broke down together and then crawled back up out of the well and figured it out. And so it is those.
And you'll get a lot of support from your peers in that way, and that's really important. Yeah.
And another thing about going to graduate school is the network. I mean, it's not really romantic in any sense. It's a network of people that you will know, you'll build relationships with, and then when you're out there in the art world, this is your network that you're going to call upon. So, yeah.
And you'll get
to
group
think
shows
about
because
too.
of that. Somebody might have a lead somewhere, and they'll help people out that they know. And that's how it works.
I think that's another thumbs up for graduate school. Is the connections that you'll make too.
Yeah.
Should we talk about the purpose? perhaps?
Yeah, we could talk about that. Yeah, I think it's really important to kind of in your letters to really kind of address like why you're going, what you're doing. It's kind of like I guess the statement of purpose is kind of like an artist statement, but it's also very specific, and you might want to address, like at that point you're addressing maybe why you're going to that place, what professors are there, and I would bring all that stuff and that language into the letter, because it's really important to kind of say like, you want to go to this school because of this person, and talk about that in your statement of purpose, as well as your and include maybe, the context for your artwork of what your art is about, and why it's important for you to be there at this time.
Like you're a puzzle piece, and you want to put yourself in there and say, hey, this is why I should be here. I do this kind of work. This kind of work will mesh with what you're doing, and basically you want to present yourself in that way that they can picture you in this program and want to have you there. What you can bring to the table, but also what you want to get out of it. And then also, different schools will have different criteria, like some will have an artist statement and a statement of purpose. So then if it doesn't have an artist statement, then you might want to bring in
You can integrate it a little bit. I think you're going to maybe repeat yourself a little bit, but don't be redundant. Just like, maybe just give a couple lines about the context of why, what you're working on is important at this time. And then you can get more in depth in your artist statement about what that really means. But I think it's kind of good to be a little bit critical within your statement of purpose. This is the time to kind of showcase yourself, and to really talk about why you want to be there and what, this is it. Here.
And to like situate yourself in an art historical context, so that
Yes.
you can say, I'm influenced by so-and-so, because, right, you're not just, like, floating around in a bubble, like, oh, I just, like, make work, and, like nothing anybody's ever made before. So that's, like, not true. So to express, like, an awareness of, like, where you come from, like, what work has been important to you, and then maybe tie that in with, who the faculty is, and why the work that they're making is important to you and would help you to grow your practice, kind of thing. Because I think they want to know that you're savvy, that you're that you have an awareness of art history, and that you're paying attention to what's
especially
going
our
on
moment now,
art,
and that context of now, and
Yeah.
why it's important for you to be there, and what you're working on, and how that relates to the art community.
Yeah, and maybe you don't have like a bunch of contemporary influences right now, but I think it's a good time to start researching and figure out like what photographers are working like now or within the past 10 years, or what artists that you're also interested in. So maybe you have influences that are older, and then you have some influences that are contemporary, and maybe one of those influences happens to teach at the particular school you're interested in. You also don't have to be interested in every single faculty member. You can just mention one of them if you're interested in working with them, because it might be obvious to them if you like do a certain kind of work and then you say you're like influenced by everybody. Well, really, your work shows that you're kind of in alignment with like this one faculty member more so than all of them.
I think it's important to be genuine.
Yeah.
Write your statement of purpose too. I think it'll come across when you are genuine, and I think when you're not, I think that your statement of purpose can be very transparent in that way.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important for you to be really honest and talk about really what you want to work on and get down to, because ultimately you will have to back that up, and you don't want to, like I mentioned earlier, you don't want to get put in a place that isn't going to support your work, and you want to have that follow through there. So definitely be honest. Definitely write your statement of purpose probably about 5 months before you're going to turn it in, and revise it about 80 times.
Even
really,
take it to a writing center, or give it to a friend who has good editorial skills.
I sent
Or
it to
professors,
all of the
yeah.
people I asked for recommendations. I also sent my statement of purpose. I also sent my artist statement.
Yeah, that's
if
great.
you have anything to add to this, or even
recommendations,
to
or-
use it for the recommendation.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely a really important factor in the portfolio. And also, I mean, your body of work, what that says is really important, but this other stuff too, it's all a package. So don't treat, it like it's not.
Yeah. Everything should have the same kind of attention and care to it as part of your package.
Yeah, and then as far as like the images,
Yeah.
we should talk about.
Well, on the statement of purpose,
Yeah.
generally, like, how long is it, or does it matter?
It's about a page, or maybe a
I've
little
tried
bit
up to
longer.
3,
Yeah,
1 to
okay,
3,
yeah.
depending on the school. It's a lot different, and like New Mexico will ask you, it's very specific what
Like
they want
word
you to
count,
address.
even.
Word count, what they want you to address,
Okay, so
down.
they'll adjust in the instructions then.
But
They'll be pretty
some
clear,
won't.
yes. I mean,
Okay.
yeah.
Some will be a little bit
yeah.
more vague, though. I'm just saying some are more focused
Yep.
of what you want to write on, but some are more vague.
And if they are vague, I mean that's a little more open then.
Right.
And so you have room to maybe stretch it for maybe a couple pages or something like that. If they don't specify,
So take the extra time, like you might have like one master statement of purpose, but then really go the extra mile to like make sure that you specifically tailor it to the questions they ask you to address for each. Because you could kind of get away with just sending the same one, but you'll be like missing some important like dialogue that I think they're asking for, where they want to know like why. I mean, a lot of them want to know like why this specific program. So you could generalize and instead say why an MFA, but really they want to know like why this
Right.
program at this time now. And
each statement of purpose I think is going to be tailored for each. It should be tailored for each school.
You should say
because-
the name of the
Yeah,
Yes.
the name,
No, it's-
the
yeah.
location.
You want to address them.
Yeah.
You want to say, hey, I want to go to this school because this specific school because of why, and so each one is going to be different. There's going to be kind of like some similarities in that letter, so you can kind of draft that out and then have like spaces to where you can fill in these things and fill in specifics, about that certain professor or that place or whatever,
Yeah, you
So-
want to show them you're paying attention.
Yeah.
That you did your research and you know about the school.
And there might be like specific historical or cultural or like social things in different places that might have an influence on your work. Going to school in Southern California
Yeah.
might be very different than going to school in New England or going to school
Yeah.
out in the desert in Arizona or New Mexico. Like
Yeah, if
those,
you do street- if-
those
Southern
things
California.
might, or going
If
to
you,
a
if you
public
do
school
if you do
or-
street photography and you're
Yeah.
applying to New Mexico, I mean you have to think about these things.
Yeah.
Or that might be a reason to go to NYU, or to think about where you're going.
And if
you
so,
know, and
like
the type of work.
talk about
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
Like I think it's okay to say like I want to live in the wherever, and this is why. But in relationship to like what the school.
Also, I guess you want to talk more about images, or
Well,
okay. Do you get any questions?
Well, it's 20 images, right? 20.
yeah.
Roughly,
most,
yeah, most.
Like, is it one body of work, or can it be two bodies of work,
That's what
or
I
is
was
it like
gonna say.
installation shots?
I would break it down into 2 to 3 groups.
Unless you
Yeah.
have a really strong
Maybe
body of
more
work.
than 2. I would
Yeah.
say more than 2.
I
Yeah.
think I did. I had like 5 slides from like 4 different bodies.
And
of
I
work.
had one body of work, 20 images from that one body, because I had been working on, it was the recent body of work that I've been working on, and that's another thing to also address. All your work should be recent.
Within the past 2 years.
It shouldn't, if you're out of your BSA for a few years, I wouldn't show all the work from your BSA.
May always be making work.
Yeah, they want to see that you're
Current.
you're always evolving and always working and thinking about things. So.
And even if you haven't exhibited it, say you take a few years off between, or several years off between undergraduate and applying, you can be developing like a cohesive body of work that you show them, and it doesn't have to be backed up by the fact that it was exhibited or something.
And
Like-
that's where good relationships with past professors come in play, because if you're making that body of work, and you have that relationship, you can bounce it off of them and say, hey, I've been out of school for 2 years, but I'm really kind of considering this, and I've made this body of work. What do you think? And I think that can really kind of improve like what you're doing, and help your chances to make things tight.
And I think it is different for the individual schools, and they will have that criteria on their list. Some will say, I don't know if this is your experience too, but we want a real cohesive body of work. Others will say, like, maybe they want to see like an evolution.
Right.
So I think that's important. That might be something that you want to, when you go and visit, to ask them specifically.
Yeah, I think ask.
So you may submit your best work to one place, and then another place you may show them what led up to part of that body.
It depends on the
Within, like,
it
a
depends on
recent context.
Yeah.
If they're asking for an evolution, you may show them,
Right. It depends on the strategy that you want to use. It could be that. And you can implement that strategy of like wanting to show maybe a build up and explain that. And I wouldn't just put it out there. I would explain like this was earlier work and this is more recent work.
That's another thing. Put everything in context too for them, so that they know exactly why you're doing things, and kind of address that in your statement. So say there's something a little off about your grades, or there's some sort of like weird glitch that you want to, don't just try to sweep it under the rug, really address it.
Yeah.
And be like open about it. So I think, so going back to what you were saying, yeah, honesty, but also to just give the context of why you're presenting yourself in this way. Like, so if you're gonna do the evolution, like talk about that in your statement.
So that all the materials like reinforce
Everything
one
else,
another.
yeah. Another thing, like I applied with 2 bodies of work, and it was about 18 images, and then 2 of those images were like installation shots, because I thought it was important to kind of see the object. And I think some places like to see that, your art in context in a gallery situation, but it depends maybe what that work is, or yeah.
So 1, 2, and 4.
3, actually, no, I'm like, I can still see it in my head. It was 3, I'm sorry. And I wrote about each body of work and their connection to one another, and they were all things that I'd done the 2 years prior to applying to school, and they were all, none of it was from, I took a lot of time off between undergrad and graduate school, so none of it was anything from undergraduate or anything like that.
I think it also has to do with kind of your practice. If you're the artist that works on one body of work for 3 years straight, then you're probably only going to show one body. But if you're the artist that you might have something that's 2 images and then that's it. Or if you work in smaller bodies, then show that. So I don't know if there's like a magic number, but I think it just depends on the context of your work. So.
And I think maybe, it's great that we can Google everything, we can figure out who is the head of every photography or art department that we're interested in, and instead of going to
even current
the
students,
art, or just like find somebody that you can email or reach out to or just call and just say, like, I'm putting together my images, and I kind of work in this way, and I just want to put them together in the way that will allow me to be received in the most successful way. And what do you guys like to see? Do you like to see one really developed body of work, or do you kind of want to see 2 things? I think it's really good to ask, and I don't think they mind being asked at all.
Right. No, I agree. I think they'll guide you, and they'll say, oh, hey, no, 2 bodies of work is good, or really just give us your most focused work,
Yeah, I think that's important. That's the most important thing. Don't put anything in there that you don't feel like it really represents what you want to do. Like, not only what you're working on now, but what you want to do in the future, or what you want to do in that program. So I think no matter what you put in, it has to be the body of work.
That's the thing too, is you might have taken some great pictures that maybe you're not invested in that kind of work anymore, and those might be really great pictures, but they're not representative of what you're trying to do. So you might want to, even though they're great, you might want to lose attachment to those and really kind of focus on what you're trying to do. because you don't want to get tied to something that is going to haunt you later, and they're going to, like, oh, why aren't you producing that kind of work, or, and, you really want it to represent yourself.
And don't be afraid to reach out to the people that you consider your mentors now, and just, because you're like sending this out into the world, like put it together, or put the images together, and have people who you trust and who've been a support system to like look at it and help you cut things that maybe you are attached to, that you feel is really good work, but for some, they see that does not lend itself to like creating a cohesive body of work.
Right.
Like get editors on your side to help you like remove the subjective part of yourself from it in a way, so that you're ready to send it out into the world.
Also, presentation of your images, I think, is really important. Obviously, the schools will have different guidelines for, most of them are CDs, JPEG on a CD, 72 dpi, they'll have very specific.
Certain like pixel widths for each
Yeah,
image.
different.
Ways to label each file.
Ways to label each file, and also just a note, label every single thing, every single piece of information. Label it with your name, your address, your phone number, your email. Label every single thing. That's just an item. But
And some of these things too are going to ask you to include a CD, and they're going to want a thumbnail printout, and they're on the CD they might even want a PDF. So think about all these things, these components, and the time it takes to prepare all these things.
For every school that I applied to, which was 5, I had like a 2-ring binder, and I had it sectioned off into the 5 schools, and I printed out all of the supporting materials for each application, highlighted it, and then looked at it 1,000 times, like
Uh-huh.
for
even have
just all
somebody
those
else
little particular,
double check your work.
Well, oftentimes your application ends up with the art department secretary, not the department you're applying to, not the people that will be looking at it. They're going to open your envelope, they're going to dump it out on their desk with all the other mail they got that day. They're going to photocopy a bunch of your stuff. They might even put your like CD into the computer, your DVD. They might like transfer it or put it onto a server. So, and then eventually, like 2 weeks later, the people who are going to review your application will be reviewing it. So it might actually go through a lot of physical distress before it ever even gets into the hands of the reviewing people, which is why it's really important to keep everything super labeled.
I would also suggest too, there's might be the impulse to put everything in, like, buy this expensive port attaché case or
No,
something.
don't do
Just
that.
follow, don't waste your money, follow their instructions. They'll tell you what they want.
Some will
And
say
you don't have to go out of your way
specifically-
to impress them. Just
Staple or
do what,
paperclip
yeah.
or-
Right.
It's not going to give you any more visibility, by doing these things. I would just follow exactly what they say. If they say put it in a manila envelope, do that. And you don't have to get the fancy one; just get the regular one.
Yeah, don't get any fancy stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, follow directions.
Yeah.
To the T.
It's funny because it can seem really, it's funny we're
Well, 'cause
talking about
you-
it so much, but it is like, it kind of becomes.
You're obsessed
like,
over it.
it
Yeah,
becomes
yeah.
obsessive
Yeah,
completely.
Yeah.
You'll have piles of stuff all over, and yeah.
Anybody else have any, or is there any things that we haven't really talked about that you guys want to address, or concerns?
How far in advance did you apply? Say the date was like January 1st. Did you do it like a couple weeks before, or a month before?
I ended up sending my stuff late, like not late, but some have postmark dates, some
Right.
have receive dates. So some of them I did postmark that day.
Okay.
But I don't think it really doesn't matter. They're not going to open up your stuff until they get everybody's.
Right.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
They
No,
have-
I mean,
Yeah.
I knew it was different.
So-
you're not going to get points by getting in
Right.
2 weeks early, but you might feel better
But
about
you
it.
will. It will decrease your stress level.
Because I know other grad programs, they want it when you're ready, when you're done, send it in. I thought it was different with art. Like they're fine with that last date.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's not going to really
Yeah.
affect your chances either way.
Okay.
I
But also
definitely,
think about
like-
shipping times too, like
Yeah.
because if there is a deadline date and not just a send by date, think about how long it's going to take to travel and where it's got to go.
Save yourself like the FedEx overnight charges that that I ended up paying.
Yeah, that's the thing. We all probably rushed
Yeah.
everything and we're down
Yeah.
to the wire. So
Yeah.
really take our advice and
Because
give
it
yourself
is,
enough
yeah.
time. And you might find yourself in that situation, but really you're going to benefit by getting everything done ahead of time.
And like there
then
are
this-
weird, yeah. In the winter, there's so many like school closures and holidays and certain days when they don't collect mail. Just like make sure you know of all the closure dates that could be potentially around the day when your application needs to be delivered, because it's not going to matter if it comes in the next day because of like some sort of mail holiday. Then they won't look at yours because
It's
they have
really-
too many to look at.
Right.
It's really
Right.
unfortunate that all these crazy little logistic things can come up in this process because, you feel like it's this big important thing and then it's like you're coming down to like one day. Your application might not get there on time. That's literally what, I mean, you're really,
Right,
so
right.
plan so far in advance that you think it's insane because it's not.
Yeah.
It's one of the most intense processes I've ever
I mean,
gone
this
through.
represents you, and this should be something that, I mean, it's really important. Treat it that way. And I know I didn't in certain ways, like was getting down to the wire, but really, if you can take any advice from us, I think it's just really give yourself enough time.
Yeah.
And just read everything and just do all these things that they say, and that's, I mean, if you get, like, for example, I've heard of, places like Yale, if you don't format things properly and your files aren't exactly how they said, they won't even look at that stuff. And you don't want to like lose the chance of really, whether it's them or anyone else, like tossing your application out because you didn't do something properly.
Yeah,
I mean,
heard
it's
that
just
about a lot of schools,
Yeah.
actually. Like,
yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, if they're looking at your thing and it's not done the right way, they'll just, because they have
Don't
100
give them,
other people to look at.
don't give them an opportunity to dismiss you.
Yep.
Like they will. So don't give them that
Yeah,
opportunity.
yeah.
And also transcripts, get those as early as,
That's
once
the
you figure
easiest
out
thing
what
you can
schools you
do.
want to apply, that day request your transcripts.
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
how it is here, but.
And also, I think summertime, a lot of those programs are out, so they're not going to be able to deal with that. And so you might want to do that starting before we hit summer, or you might want to do that first thing when school's back in session, or think
For
about these things.
Long Beach, it's easy. You just do it online. I got mine in a week. Less
Some
than
are
a
easy,
week.
but then
Yeah.
some you might have to deal with a community
Yeah, I
college
have to go to
and they're going to give you this
Community college is
runaround that's like
notoriously
6
harder
weeks,
to do that,
for your
yeah.
transcripts, and you're
Yeah.
like, what?
You might have to pay,
Yeah.
To expedite. Some places will let you expedite,
Right.
and so. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like you're dealing with a bunch of universities, and as we all know, like, the rules they're not, you can't bend them, so anything that has to do with deadlines is,
Firm.
yeah,
Yeah.
firm.
You had a question?
Yeah, so how would you go about maybe finding other colleges I'm sure there are plenty of colleges I don't even know exist
Yeah.
that might have really good programs. I mean, how would you go about finding sort of maybe colleges that are, not Yale or
Right.
Yeah.
or UCLA
Right.
that might be a good fit for you?
I would start looking at, there's a lot of lists that come out, whether it's, I don't know,
The
what are
list,
these? Yeah.
though,
That's what I'm
they're-
wondering.
I
I've seen
wouldn't
a
follow
list.
these lists as being absolute, but I mean, that's a
No,
list of
yeah.
schools, so you might want to then look into the programs there. And that would give you a good place to start.
Look into artists that you really like that are working now, that maybe are a little younger. See where they came from. Ask your professors, hey,
Yeah.
do you know of any programs that, are interesting things are coming out of right now? I know in undergrad, my professors had a list of places where they were, they said, oh, you should go here, schools they've never heard of before. So,
Mhm.
I think use all the
Like,
resources
use the
that
resources
you can.
have now.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think what's really important too is that Renee was saying that you should look into. I mean, everyone here is looking at artists and maybe some that are more advanced and develop their careers, but there's a lot of younger artists out there. I would see where these people came from. Just you got to do a lot of digging, and that's what it's going to be. It's you're going to be on the computer googling this and that, and figuring out these kind of things.
I found a list of all the art schools.
There's lists
Yeah.
out there that kind of
There's
that.
the Peterson rankings.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
rankings
It's
of
the-
schools.
There's a U.S. News.
Peterson.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was thinking. It was the
Yeah,
U.S.
Peterson
News and
yeah.
report that kind of ranks things. But
Yeah, they don't do it by photo, so you have to go through every
Right, art school. Yeah.
Mhm. And you can start, if you know that you want to be in New York or LA, you can just start looking, going to the, the art department website and figure out who the faculty is at every, I actually literally did that for Southern California. I went through every state university, all the Cal State and UC schools. I looked at every art department, and it was like I was stalking the faculty at each one. I spent so much time looking these people up, figuring out where they went to school, were they teaching, what was their work like. I didn't know who all these people were. It's now that I'm here, I'm realizing some of the people that I was researching are huge artists. I didn't know they were. You're not expected to know all of that stuff, but you might actually be surprised what you find if you're honing in on a certain area too. Or if you want to go to school in San Francisco, or you want to go to school in Chicago, just start digging into those departments and see who's there. And if you don't like their work, you might not want to, but then again, sometimes you don't like your professor's work, but they're amazing and they're such a resource to you. So it's always
there's a battle. Yeah.
So that's where visiting the campus and maybe sitting on a crit.
All these things are so important.
Okay, maybe I'm not interested in their work, but wow, they can lead a crit.
Because you might not see their kind of intelligence and their depth within their work, but then when they speak, it might be a totally different story.
For example, I'll just even bring this up. I went and saw Gregory Crutzen speak about his work once, and it was very disappointing because he didn't really speak that much about it, and I've gone and seen other people that their work, maybe they don't have the career as certain people, but they can speak about their work and create a dialogue that I think is more inspiring than work itself sometimes. So yeah, there is that kind of dichotomy that exists out there.
Good artists aren't always good teachers.
Yeah.
That's true too, yeah. And just because you are a name and successful doesn't mean it's
and
going to
you
be...
might have someone that is, like you said, under the radar a little bit, but is really going to support your work and really going to help you and shape you as an artist.
Be an advocate for you.
Right.
Yeah.
And ask you the right questions that draws that thing out of you that somebody else might not be able to, even though they're an art star or something.
Yeah. And then also I was interested in the diversity of the faculty, and that kind of what led me here, because there are more resources here, about 5 full-time or whatever, it's
4 full-time.
4 full-time, but and then a couple adjuncts.
A lot of adjuncts, actually. I think that's what's good about this school is they bring in a lot of adjuncts, and that's another thing to think about too. Is a lot of places of who they're bringing in. Are you only going to get those core people, or are they bringing in a good visiting artist lecture series? And these things are really important because also in grad school it's about the meetings that you get. They're having a visiting artist lecture, and you get all these current people that are coming from different countries or different parts of the country, and you get to get studio visits with them, and that's great. That's really kind of important too.
Yeah, and then in a school that only has 2 full-time faculty, and then you're kind of choosing your mentor out of 2, that was a little scary to me, to only have the limited options. So I think when you're looking at faculty, you really hone in on the accessibility, the number, just what kind of resource that is.
Is it crucial that you're exhibiting work?
Is that what?
Is it crucial that you're exhibiting work prior to applying for grad school?
Not necessarily. I think it helps. It can help. If you I don't know, are getting shows and you put that on your resume, that's only going to boost you. I don't think it's necessary at all.
I think they're going to take into account your age and where you're at. If you've just gotten your undergraduate degree, you're going to have less time to be exhibiting. If you've been out of undergraduate for several years, maybe it might be kind of weird if you have a resume with nothing. Or they might be a little more is this person ready? How long have they been totally disconnected from things?
Sure.
Yeah. And I think that the kind of top tier schools have more students that are exhibiting, but I know for a fact there are students at those schools that aren't exhibiting all that much.
Sure.
So I don't think that there's a formula there that you have to have.
I think it makes you more appealing as a candidate of some prospect of who they're going to take in. Yeah, if you're getting all these shows, it's going to boost you, you know. But it's not necessary. I don't think. It comes down to your work again, you know, and you just might not be in that network of people that are seeing your work, and so that doesn't mean your work is not good because you're not having shows, you know.
Yeah, I asked
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I heard at UCLA like they weren't even really considering it.
I don't think that's true. No, because